Could Moses have written the Pentateuch? Moses in third person. This is an often used argument against the authorship of Moses. Many times we find in the Pentateuch the following phrase: "The Lord said to Moses," or "Moses wrote this law." Moses is spoken about in the third person. Baruch Spinoza argued that Moses could not have been the author of the Pentateuch, since Moses is referred to in the third person, he as opposed to the first person I. Could Moses have used the third person style of speech? Moses is mentioned hundreds of times as a third person. How can this be explained? What was the writing style of historians? Did they use third person speech in the historical writings? Let's have a look at some examples. Hecataeus of Miletus begins his work by identifying himself in the third person. Herodotus also conveys his representation of history in the third person. Thucydides begins his work, The Peloponnesian War, with the third person self-reference. Xenophon, a student of Socrates, records in the Anabasis his march with the 10,000 as they travel into and back from Persia in an effort to aid Cyrus. Even persons like Caesar or Josephus used third person to refer to themselves. Julius Caesar refers to himself in the third person throughout his work Gallic War. Josephus in War of the Jews presented himself as a participant in the historical events conveyed by referring to himself in the third person. Obviously, using third person was the normal approach in historical writings. What was the reason to use third person speech? These ancient historians utilized the third person style to provide objective and authoritative accounts of historical events. By employing this narrative approach, they aimed to present their subject matter in a manner that appeared detached from personal biases and interpretations, focusing on factual information and analysis. Did other Bible writers also use third-person speech for themselves? Yes. Jeremiah wrote his book in the third-person narrative. He used this style about 130 times. Daniel wrote his book in the third-person narrative. He used this style about 60 times. Joshua wrote his book in the third-person narrative. He used this style about 160 times. What is the motivation to write in the third-person style? By referring to himself in the third person, he may have aimed to emphasize the divine authority behind his words and actions. It could be seen as a way of presenting himself as a vessel for God's message, rather than merely expressing his own opinions or experiences. Ancient historians used the third-person narrative of writing. Bible writers also used the third-person narrative of writing. The third-person narrative, where Moses is referred to in the third person rather than using I or me, is seen as an editorial choice made by Moses himself. The third-person narrative does not negate the authorship of Moses.